Happy Sabbath, church.
Happy Sabbath.
The happiness that God brings in our heart, nobody can replace. You cannot buy, you cannot borrow, you cannot steal it. You have to provide for yourself by tasting and experiencing how good is our God and Creator. Amen. Subject for our discussion this morning is not so pleasant, is it? We know many stories in the Bible. We love to hear the story about Moses, how he grew up, and Joseph, how he ended up, and many others. But this one is really, really devastating. And we have several of these stories in the Bible. The Sodom and Gomorrah had the same result. And some other places, cities, some people experienced the same end. More modern story in 79 AD when volcano Vesuvius erupted and covered the city of Pompeii with ashes and very severe gas that killed people just as they were, and people were able to excavate those horrified figures just recently now. And the story goes on and on. There is no end yet. Today we can see the war, and not just the rumors of war. People are dying from all possible things. This natural disease or not diseases, and bombshells or gas or other things. But what is all this teaches us? This is the question. This is the question. The hand that wrote on the wall in Babylon is ready to write again, and that would be not so good. One time, Steve Jobs, the founder of the Apple company, he says, "For the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirrors every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today?" The king of, we're going to study today about Belshazzar. He had a feast. If he would know that it was the last one in his life, he would definitely do different way. Don't you think so? Many of us, all of us, we think, one day I will fix my relationship with God. One day. All humanity kind of tending or leaning to think that way. One day I will do different. One day. One day. If the Belshazzar would know that was the last one, he would do completely different. How about us today? Why we would not rewrite or replan, reschedule our plans according to the knowledge that we already have. The Hebrews chapter 4 verse 2, book of Hebrews chapter 4 verse 2, it reads, "For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them." We can hear it, we can be very active even in Sabbath school. But the word could not profit them. It could happen. Why? The reason why, the second part of the verse answered, because not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2. In Daniel chapter 5, that's the main chapter that we're going to study today, verse 22, when Daniel showed up in that palace, he said these words, "And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thy heart, though thou knewest all this." What did he know? What did he know? The Belshazzar was the the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and he grew up in Babylon. He grew up in the city where all the action were happening during the last, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years, was not that much apart, those events. He was able to witness or knew about when the Babylonians were inventing more land, they bringing slaves, and he definitely knew about Daniel and his three friends, the Daniel, pledged not to defile himself from the king's table, according to chapter 1. He definitely knew about the king of his grandpa in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar, who had a very prophetic, profound dream, troubled him, and he knew that nobody else could explain except one man. There was Daniel, and he knew the prophecy about it. In chapter 3, he knew how his grandpa wanted to turn off the prophecy against and not to obey it, and he built the statue from the pure gold. He heard there were 3 young men who opposed to bow down. He knew all of that. That's why he's bringing to his attention that you knew all that. You are not ignorant. You are not the one who just came in and have no idea about those things. What you're getting now, you are punished for things that you didn't do, that you supposed to do it. My dear brother, how many things you know and not doing it? What James says? To one who know and not do it, to him it's sin. So, continue on discussing about the chapter 3 of Daniel, when the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, at that time built that statue from pure gold, and those 3 young men didn't want to bow down, even pretend. We can say, or someone maybe advise them, well, the God's law is not so literal. It may be just spiritual. You can pretend that you bow down and pick up something from the floor. It didn't work for them, although it works for us. God will understand. God will understand that the law of God is not so literal. You don't have to take that practical way. You have to believe in your heart, and that would be, God will understand, definitely. So, it didn't work for them, and there was a best missionary activity ever done in the world. Millions of people from entire empire knew who God is, because Jesus Christ himself went in that furnace and saved them. And King acknowledged it. But it was not it. The story goes on in chapter 4, when God was so patient with this, I don't know why, with this king. God gave him another dream about big tree, and the tree was cut down, just the stump left, and says, leave it there for 70 years, and I'll teach him a lesson. And he knew that was about the king of Babylon. That was not about Nebuchadnezzar, how he was warned by Daniel, when he interpreted again, Daniel interpreted dream, that's what is going to happen to you. You're going to be for 7 years in exile, for 7 years, and you're not going to be around. And did king believe? He did believe it. He did. And one day when he walked up on the top of the roof, and he says, not this, the Babylon that I built with my hand, to my majesty, to my honor. And Bible says at the same time, the very same time, when the words still were in his mouth, God's word was to him. It is taking from you. But I want you to take back a little bit to verse 27, chapter 4. Daniel didn't just give the explanation, he gave advice. What was in that advice? There was advice for king and advice for me and you today. 27, Daniel 4:27. Wherefore, king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thy iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. What was the condition of his peace? Make right with God and be merciful to the poor. That's it. So, the same requirement we have today. There's nothing new, and God never ever changed. So, and this is the problem. In verse 30, we already said what we said. And I really like the best of King of Nebuchadnezzar in verse 37, his statement, his declaration. after 7 years, after all that he went through, he said this: "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose work are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase." So, did Belshazzar knew it? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He had a clear knowledge about these things, what was happening to his grandpa, and he didn't want to follow it. He went his way. Let's go back to the story, and in Daniel chapter 5, we read verses 1 through 3. "Belshazzar the king made a great feast to thousands of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them." So big disgrace. What was going on there? Belshazzar the king, that was about year 539 BC. Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC, about that time. Nebuchadnezzar had taken gold and silver vessels from the temple of Jerusalem. Those who have taken notes, I can give you the reference, 2 Chronicles 36:10. You can find the record about that. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 10. When the grandpa went and took those stuff. That was one offense, but he aggravated because he defiled, he began to drink out of it. We're not going to go in details about the motives. And Belshazzar adds insult to injury by using them at the feast. So you can go far, but you can go too far. And that too far, when God says enough is enough. They praise the gods of gold and silver. Verse 4, they drank wine and praised the gods of gold, of the silver, and of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. They become guilty of idolatry. Ephesians 5:5, "For this ye know that no fornicator, unclean person, no covetous, no man who is idolatrous has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ of God." It's pure. No idolaters. Same subject, Colossians 3:5. The last part says, "and covetous, which is idolatry." Matthew 6:24 says, "You cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon." You have to choose which one you want to serve. In your bulletin on the very back, you can find this paragraph there. One of the marked features of Noah's day was the intense worldliness that prevailed. Eating and drinking and dressing, buying and selling, marrying and giving in marriage, marked all classes, high and low. Listen here. It is not sinful to supply the necessity of life. There's nothing wrong to eat, drink, get married. This is a duty, but when eating and drinking and dressing are made the supreme objects of life, then they become sin. Nothing wrong to eat and be hungry and satisfy your hunger. Absolutely. God has provided food with which to supply hunger. But when eating and drinking are carried to excess, they become gluttony and drunkenness, and this is sin. I have another paragraph that you don't have it. That which was primarily a duty is nowadays carried to excess, and the result of gluttony and drunkenness are theft, murder, lust, and gratification of every base passion, and indulgence in every kind of satanic cruelty. Same book. 10 AMR 262, paragraph 4. Many even of those who have their names in the church books are a great dishonor to the one whose name they profess. The Son of God gave His precious life that He might redeem all who would be converted and forsaken their unrighteous ways. What happened then? Panic and humiliation happens in the palace of King Belshazzar at that time. He was a relatively young man. He was not that experienced one. He was very proud and arrogant in things that he was doing. And verse 5, let's read verse 5. We're back in Daniel chapter 5, verse 5. In the same hour, which hour? What hour? When they were drinking and feasting and having good time, let's say. In the same hour came forth the fingers of man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of hand that wrote. The hand was up to the wrist, up this part. Imagine. I mean, people saw different things. But they didn't have a chance to see the God Himself, just His fingers. And that terrified them already. A vivid illustration. Pride goes before destruction. There was a momentarily change in that group of people. There was a bunch of people, a lot of people, all the nobles one. They drink, they have laugh, they joke about things, and all of a sudden, the things change. The things change. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. Do you see the consequences or steps, how it goes? And he saw was a man's hand. If just a tiny manifestation of God's power had that effect, then what would be the effect of the face of God when Jesus comes? You know, the book of Revelation gives us very sad pictures, you know. In book of Revelation, chapter 6 verses. You can read all the way from 12. I'll read just some of the 15. And every free man hid himself in the dens and in the rocks of the mountain, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of Him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of His wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? That's another question that I want you to take home. Who shall be able to stand? Brethren, if you think that you're a little bit overeating, a little bit over drinking, a little bit oversleeping, that's okay. It is not okay. Anything what we do in excess, even good things, can be a sin and lead us down. Okay? This is the said part. Fall on us and hide us from the face of Him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. And Psalm 1:5 says, therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in a congregation of righteousness. But we can if we have pure heart and holy hands. Psalm 24, those who take notes, 3-5, he who has clean hands and pure heart, who was not lifted up his soul to an idol. The question is asking, who may stand in His holy place? And there was the answer for that. The reference is Psalm 24, 3-5. Things happened, and there was a commotion, and full silence. Immediately change. When God's presence, God is coming in, there are things are changed immediately. In life of anyone, righteous or sinner, it doesn't matter who you are, it's going to be a change. For righteous one, there would be joy and acceptance of the advice. For sinners one, there would be a horrible meeting and facing the reality that you didn't, as this man in chapter 5 verse 22, you knew that and you didn't do what you already know. That was the saddest part said to King Belshazzar. So verses 7 through 9, same chapter, we continue reading. Verse 6 also says that his countenance was changed and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Brave, arrogant, proud man. What happened to him? The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with a scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be a third ruler in the kingdom. See how much value he puts on those things. He was trying to bribe people with material stuff. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was the king Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changing him, and his lords were astonished. Nobody can say it, and we know that we're facing doom. What to do next? What next we can do? Just as Nebuchadnezzar, his grandpa, when he was facing same challenges, he couldn't find anyone from his advisors, decent man to interpret that. The helpless advisor. How can you, my dear brother and sister, go to some worldly advisor to ask for a spiritual matter or for important matter? I'm really sorry for those people who claim or call themselves a Christian and go to psychologists. Brother, that's the same thing. Whom did he call? Astrologers, magicians, all possible smart people at that time. So do you and me. If you are having Christ on your right hand and you follow him, why do you need to? I believe I know that depression is following many of us. I do know that. That's why we have prayer groups. That's why we have close groups. That's where we have pastors, we have ministers whom we go and we share and we get help from them. People often do the same thing today in the times of in a time of crisis. In a time of crisis, we remember things, but we're just showing who we are. They go to the wrong places for help, looking for their own strength or wisdom, or often for another people. What the Bible says about the one who curse is the one who trusts in another man. Yes. The Bible very simple and encouraging us in Matthew 6:33, seek ye first kingdom of God and his righteousness. In Proverbs 3:5-10, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he shall direct your paths. Brethren, this story is not about the Belshazzar, not just about Nebuchadnezzar. It's about me and you today. What are you doing when you get in crisis? Whom you asking for help? Did you go that far as this King Belshazzar, or are you still on the way down? Do you still have a chance? And the queen was definitely not his wife, was his mom, most likely from the verses. She was not part of that. Absolutely. She came in. When she heard all that big noise, she couldn't stand that. She knew the history. But once she heard everything all of a sudden stopped, she was troubled. And she walked in. We're reading from verse 10, chapter 5. The queen, because of the wrong of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thought trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is a spirit of the Holy Ghost. So nice, so good reference was given to Daniel. He was always around, but they just asked him in time of trouble. That's the problem. That's how we're using our Jesus Christ with infinite wisdom when we are in trouble. Other things, other time we can handle on our own. And in the days of your father, he brings a history, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, inasmuch as an excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give interpretation. It was a perfect description. Brother, how much we would be pleased when somebody of our neighbors or co-worker get in trouble, and they will give a reference to you about the same thing. He would say, look, go to Sister Marie, go to Brother Antoine. And don't worry, he knows how to solve this issue. Go to him. I have a good experience with him. That's how we should be, how people should know us. And Daniel from verse 13, one time before we go in reading that, we have to do what we have to do, brother, and not to postpone things, and not to wait the things will improve by itself. Mark Twain once says, 20 years from now, you will be disappointed by things you didn't do than by the ones you did. In other words, you got to do what you got to do. Don't postpone. Don't wait, because later on down the road, you will be disappointed, not of the things that you did, but things that you didn't do it. Right. This is the problem. Many times we have this regret, but we cannot do much because everything is gone. Twice the king says, I have heard of you in this passage. Daniel chapter 5, verse 13 through 16. Then Daniel was brought in before king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, are you that Daniel who is one of the captives of Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? Question mark. I have heard of you, that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men and astrologers have been brought in before me, that they should read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not give the interpretation of the things. And again, the same words. And I have heard, he was not ignorant, that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writings and make known to me this interpretation, you shall be clothed with a purple and have a chain of gold. The same thing, no? And shall be the third rulers in the kingdom. Why third? It's a different subject for different time, because he himself didn't get the first place. But that's, like I said, different subject. It sounds as though the king knew him only by reputation. I heard about you. I knew about you. I know you from someone else. People in the world are not much different. They make little effort to get to know the people of God. And they just heard about that and not much more than that. The time to get to know God, God's people, it's now, not after, because after it's too late. How did Daniel accept this great offer? 3 things was offered to him. Remember? The dress, the coat, the chain, and the position. 3 things. How much he got? Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. I always admired the prophets. They have no shame. They speak up, and that's why they suffer so much. I barely can count prophets they were honored and loved in the history. Most of them were beaten, even killed for speaking the truth. The Bible says this: woe unto you when everybody will speak good about you. If you try to satisfy everyone, if you shut down, you close your mouth when time to speak, and you just speak something that would not hurt someone's feelings, you are doing Satan's job. Sorry. Daniel recounts a lesson from the history. Daniel not just give an interpretation, he gave him some lesson. What was in that lesson? Verse 18. O King, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, kingdom and majesty, glory and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and learned before him. Was right or wrong? Everything was right, no, so far. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. Verse 20. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him.
That's right.
What was he trying to make a point of? That you have this power until God will take it back.
That's right.
Brethren, I really want us to learn this lesson. Everything what you have, everything, your health, you can walk, you can talk, you can sing, you can read, you can preach, you can do many things. Your house, the roof above your head when you're living, some money, a lot of little, it doesn't matter, but you still have something to pay for your needs. All of your intellect, the knowledge that you have, skills, if God will take that away, you will become just as this king for 7 years was in exile. Then he was driven from the sons of man. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with the grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven. Till he knew, listen here, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of man and appoints over it whomever he chooses. In my Bible, it's a New King James. He would do well to learn the history. Those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, someone says. It is especially true with the inspired history. I mean, when you have the Bible in your hands. Irma Bombeck, she wrote this. When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left and could say, I use everything you gave me. Would be a good motto for us as well. My dear brothers and sisters, where we are in this history? Are we at that moment as a Belshazzar when too late to change? He knew it. He knew all of that. And we do too. Belshazzar did not learn from his father's experience. Daniel chapter 5, verse 22 and 24. But you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. We can be brave, smart, wise. We can pick on people. We can speak harsh words, sharp words. We can show how to do things. But we will miss this. Everything else would be in vain. In vain when we read Ecclesiastes first chapters, when Solomon looked back to everything what he achieved, he said, look, everything what I wanted, I could permit it myself. I got it. But when I look back again, everything is vanity. The food for a hunger needs to be provided. Absolutely, yes. But everything with more than that, an excess, it is sin. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drink wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. Next. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. I couldn't say more than he said, no? He was not ashamed. He was not intimidated. The Bible does not bring any record how many, but I believe a couple hundreds at least were there. At least. He exalted himself when he should have glorified God. This handwriting on the wall was sent. When will people learn from the history? Should we not learn from the pride of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, who said, "Who is God? I know not God, and I will not let Israel go." I love this song, "Let My People Go." That's right. By Armstrong, I believe, no? It was amazing. Indeed, the inspired history was written for our learning. Romans 15:4. Whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scripture, might have hope. Belshazzar failed to benefit from his knowledge of God's dealing with mankind, and so upon him was the doom has to come upon him. The handwriting on the wall explain it. Let's move on. Verse 25. And this is the inscription that was written. MENE, TEKEL, UPHARSIN. This is the interpretation. Daniel didn't make himself too proud of that the king has to beg him to tell him the impression. Not at all. He said, "You wanted to know? I'll tell you. I'll tell you what God is telling you." This is the interpretation of each word. MENE, God has numbered, and there is a two time, no? God has really numbered your kingdom and finished it. TEKEL, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Paris, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The message of Daniel's interpretation is that Belshazzar's kingdom had been numbered for destruction. The king himself is weighed and found wanting. The kingdom was to be taken away and given to the Medes and Persians. Meanwhile, when king was feasting, he knew the Media and Persian, they were surrounding the city. But they trust so much in the walls and the water around the walls and the strong gates that they couldn't even imagine what could happen. In a worst dream, they couldn't imagine that. What did the king of Persia did? They divert the water from the river Euphrates, which was going through the city, and they march on the bed of the river right in the downtown, and they burst in that party hall right there. And the Bible gives us a sad, very sad record. The king was killed, or slain. The very last, I believe before last, verse 30. The king of Chaldeans was slain at that very night. My dear brothers and sisters, this is not just a sad story, it's a destiny of all humanity. The God's judgment is inevitable. But let's just have a couple more things before we conclude. Remember, the king promised to Daniel 3 things. Verse 29, Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with a purple and put a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Third of nothing. There was no kingdom. There was no kingdom after that. The kingdom was gone. This night, your soul will be required of you. Verse 30-31, same book of Daniel, we read here, In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old, 62 years old, with simple language. New Testament has similar stories, brethren. When Jesus was about to teach his listeners the valuable lessons, he brought up this parable in Luke chapter 12 about one farmer, chapter 12, verse 15 through 21. The ground of certain rich men brought forth plentiful. And there was a conversation. I'll just speak some of the. Verse 18. This will I do. Man talk to himself. Are you talking to yourself sometimes? I do. At least I'm reasoning to myself. Should I do it? Should I not? Yeah. And he was doing the same thing. This will I do. And verse 19. I will say to my soul. He was convincing himself that was the right way to do it. Verse 20 says, but God said unto him. See, what you're talking to yourself doesn't mean that it's always true. But when God talks, that would stay as a last word to be said. Thou fool, this night thou soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? Boasting one day and dead the next one. Remember that we are a temple of God, and God wants us to take a good care of this. It's a place where we developing our character. Definitely God will change this body. He doesn't need it. He will change to the glorious one, immortal one. But this body is given you to keep it protected and showing that even your body belongs to God as well. It's not yours. It is not yours. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 through 17, you can find this. Do not know that you are the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwelling in you. If God did not view lightly the measure of His vessels then, why do you think He would ignore and treat lightly things today? If He was concerned about the vessels from the temple, and you are the living vessels, and He values you, and He appreciates you. My dear brothers and sisters, I want to tell you one more thing. The Belshazzar thought that he just with his friend and nobles in that room, but there were someone else who was taking precise record of every single thing what was going on. They are today. The angels are taking record. And one day we will face that record. Everything what we said, we did, even what we were thinking is going to be before us. So we have to think about that. On the back of your bulletin, if you read that one with me, paragraph 2, in the balances of the sanctuary, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to be weighted. We're talking about a personal exam, and now we're talking about the as church as a whole, because when Jesus Christ will come, He will come for a church without a spot and wrinkles. And that church are built up from many members like you and me. So we should be pure as individuals and as a church, have a right direction and right goals as well. In the balances of the sanctuary, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to be weighted she will be judged by the privileges and advantages that she has had. Chapter 5 of Daniel, verse 22. You knew this. You knew all of this. You should take lesson out of that. If her spiritual experience does not correspond to the advantages that Christ, at infinite cost, has bestowed on her, if the blessing conferred have not qualified her to do the work entrusted to her, on her will be pronounced the sentence, found wanting. By the light bestowed, the opportunities given, will she be judged. It's not a light matter, my dear brother and sister. It's a very serious business. The more you know, the more responsibilities you carry. The third paragraph in your bulletin, the church cannot measure herself by world, nor by opinion of man, nor by what she once was. Her faith and her position in the world as they now are must be compared with what they would have been if her course had been continually onward and upward. The church will be weighed in the balances of the sanctuary. It's in different categories, same expression. Balances not made in America or some other country. The balances of sanctuary. We know what is in a sanctuary, We know there's a 10 commandments by which all humanity would be judged. If her moral character and spiritual state do not correspond with the benefits and blessings, again, I would like to refer this to the privileges and advantages, it's similar, the benefits and blessings God has conferred upon her, she will be found wanting. In other words, you receive, you got to utilize it. Remember parable about talents? One received 5, another one 3, another one 1. So they have to put in work. If her talents are unimproved, if her fruit is not perfect before God, if her light has become darkness, she is indeed found wanting. The knowledge of our state as God views it seems to be hidden from us. We see but perceive not. We hear but do not understand. And we rest as unconcerned as if the pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire by night rest upon our sanctuary. It's similar like, we are children of Abraham. We never been slaves and so forth. Well, it's a very simple remedy. If you are, you should do the deeds what Abraham did. We profess to know God and to believe the truth, but in works deny Him. Our deeds are directly adverse to the principle of truth and righteousness by which we profess to be governed. Every man who will not reconcile with God until the close of probation will face God not in the best way. They will hide, they will run away from Him. They would not be able to stand. Who will then? Who will? Who will? Revelation 7:4, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 104,000 of the 44,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. In conclusion, I'd like to read from Revelation chapter 14, definition or some of the characteristics of the 144,000. We have no choice, brethren, because we are living in this world. Verse 1. I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the mountains, on Mount of Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard the voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harps, harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne, before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. And verse 4 gives more details. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb, whithersoever he goes. These are redeemed from among men, being a first fruit unto God. And in their mouth was no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. May these encouraging words and at the same time warning would stay in front of us through the rest of our life, as long as we live. Remember, God is merciful God, but all mercy has a limit. And knowledge that we possess, knowledge that we have, we are responsible for it. Amen.